Sometimes we need to believe it to see it. Let me say that one more time. Sometimes we need to believe it to see it. And in this week's episode, I'm going to take you through a quick framework that you can use to start to lean into all the beliefs that can serve you and remove the beliefs that hold you back from stepping into your best possible future. This week's episode is going to be the ABCs of turning negativity into possibility. Now, the thing to know before we start is that our brain cannot tell the difference between a thought and real, a false threat and a real threat. The threat of someone judging me versus the threat of someone chasing me down the street trying to take my handbag. The threat of thinking that someone doesn't like me versus the threat of our children stepping off the sidewalk into traffic. One is in our mind and one is a reality, but our brain and our body cannot tell the difference. Our body and our brain will respond to a perceived threat in the exact same way it would a very real threat. And so we can have this awareness that our thoughts can literally move us forward or literally hold us back in our tracks. It helps us then take inspired action toward the thoughts that help us and also take inspired action towards the thoughts that are hindering us. And then we get to decide which thoughts we want to keep in our life and which ones we want to move off into the sidelines. Now, it's not that these thoughts will not be there, but it's that we can then decide what to do with them when they appear. So this week's episode is a short but very tactical strategy that you can use anytime you find the negativity stepping into the driver's seat of your life. So ABC stands for an activating thought, a belief, more importantly, an irrational belief, C, a consequence that happens with that belief, and then two important steps. We then dispute that irrational belief versus just taking it at face value or at thought value. And then when we dispute this belief, we get to exchange the negative feelings from our past and move it into positive, feel-good, powerful feelings for our future. So you might want to grab a pen or a paper before we start, but A stands for an activating event. It also, in my mind, stands for an awareness. So we can bring an awareness to the types of events or thoughts that stop us. We can then, with acceptance and empathy for ourselves, take inspired action. But we cannot take action without awareness. So the first thing is to become aware. So with an awareness now, with a light touch, I want you to think about an activating event that tends to stop you in your tracks. It could be a recurring thought. It could be when you step into a social situation. It could be when you want to stretch yourself and do something at work. Some sort of event that when it happens, it tends to instigate a belief or a false belief about yourself and your place in this world. And I'll share an example from my own life that might help you get a little bit more strategic. So an activating event for me in my past, not these days because I've done a lot of the hard work. I mean, there are other activating events, but not this one. So an activating event from my past would be anytime I was about to step on stage. I would have incredible nerves. My stomach would be tied up in knots. I'd be feeling incredibly anxious. So that was the activating event. So take a moment and think, is there an activating event in your life that comes up frequently that causes an uncomfortable stirring of feelings inside of you? Now, don't go ruminating, don't go digging. If you don't have one, fantastic. But if you can think of something, just maybe write it down or take a mental note of it. A trigger that begins this catalyst of negative feelings that then create negative actions or actions that don't move you forward. They kind of paralyze you or even propel you back a little bit. So B is then the belief. What beliefs come up? Most importantly, irrational beliefs. These are often the negatives that we tell ourselves, the stories that we drag from a past, a comment that someone said 10 years ago that we still wear as a badge today, like they told me this and I still believe it to be true. And I guarantee you, the minute you left the room, they've already forgotten that they said anything. But what is an irrational belief that you have that comes up around this particular event? Be it something at work, be it something in a relationship, be it something that you want to do, but you haven't done yet, because every time you go to do this thing, you have this irrational belief. So for me, the activating event was every time I was about to step on stage. B, the irrational belief was, now listen to this, my irrational belief was, because I was stepping on the stage as a fitness expert. I never said I am a fitness expert, but because of my history, my decades of experience, people would introduce me as fitness expert Petra Kolber. But I took the word expert to mean that I needed to know every single possible thing that you were to know, or you could know, or you should know about fitness and wellness and nutrition and exercise and strength and cardiovascular and flexibility and every single muscle and bone, and the list goes on. Now, did anyone ever say to me, Petra, for you to be worthy of being on the stage as a presenter, you need to know every single thing about every single muscle, every tendon, everything about nutrition, everything about, and the list goes on? No, but that was my irrational belief. Now, you could go on a little bit of a discovery right here. Again, with a light touch, you might want to go, where does that belief come from? My particular belief, I think, came from the time that a dancing teacher that I very much admired and wanted her to just like respect everything that I did, told me, you're never going to make it. You're not smart enough. You're not talented enough to make it as a dancer. It was a dancer at the time. But I think those words of you're not smart enough stayed with me. So I have the activating event of stepping on stage. I had the irrational belief that I needed to know every single thing that there was to know about health and wellness to be relevant, to be worthy, to be on that stage. So again, I don't know what your activating event is. I don't know what your irrational beliefs are, but C is the consequence. And this is the thing that we often don't pay attention to. So when you have this activating event that causes this irrational belief about how you need to show up in the world, what's the consequence? Does it empower you or does it disempower you? Does it energize you to go and put yourself out into the world, or does it make you want to retreat into the shadows? The consequence for me was, now I didn't have an option. I was paid to get on the stage, so I didn't have the option of not showing up. But the consequence was that every time I stood on stage, I was never in the present moment. I was always waiting for someone to ask me a question where I would be found out. Like, see, she's not worthy of being an expert. She doesn't know the answer to that question. She shouldn't be here. It should be somebody else. Why is she so successful? She isn't deserving. This is all going on in my head. So the consequence for me was that while I enjoyed my fitness career, I was never fully present on stage because I was always waiting to be caught out, found out. It was imposter syndrome on steroids. And so what happened, it actually separated me a little bit from the audience. I don't think they would have noticed, but I was always 1, 2, or 3 beats ahead, waiting for and trying to anticipate who's in the room that's smarter than me? What's the question that could be asked that I don't know the answer to? And I got to tell you, in my entire fitness career, I think there were 2 questions that I really didn't know the answer to. I can't quite remember how I got out of that, because now these days I would just say, that's a great question. I have no idea what the answer is. And I would not attach me not knowing to my self-worth. I would not create an irrational belief that me not knowing an answer to a question means I should not be on that stage. Crazy. Now I would just say, that's a great question. 1, does anybody else in this room know the answer? Because I don't need to be the smartest one in the room. Or B, these days, if no one else knew the answer, I would say, hey, I'm just going to ask my virtual assistant, ChatGPT, and I'll get back to you. We don't need to know everything. It is not our job or my job to know everything. However, it is my job to share what I know. So for me, my activating event was stepping on stage. B, my irrational belief was that I needed to know everything there was to know to be worthy of being on that stage. And C, the consequence for me was that every time I was on stage, I was never fully present because I was always waiting to be found out. And so that brought a lot of anxiety. So take a moment and now for yourself, A, can you think of an activating event? Again, if you don't have one, don't go ruminating for it. B, what are the beliefs, the irrational beliefs that are attached to this event? And then C, what are the consequences? It could be negative feelings about yourself. It could be that you don't start or you don't ask for help or whatever it might be. It's taking action that is not in your best interest. So that's often where we stop. There's an event, we have this belief, it's a negative consequence, and we just go, that's just the way I am. That's just the way life is. But I'm going to give you 2 more steps now. D, I want you to dispute that belief. Where is the evidence to show you that that is true? So for me, my disputing my false beliefs actually began in a therapist's office because I thought I needed to be perfect to be worthy. And I remember this moment as I was leaving my therapist's office because we had just been talking about how much anxiety I had when I was presenting and all these things. And she said, Petra, no one relates to perfect. And it really hit me that I want to be relatable. I want to be able to connect to people on a deeper, meaningful level. So maybe this idea of being perfect is not working in my favor. And slowly and surely, when we dispute the belief, it doesn't happen overnight. These are years of false beliefs that need to be unraveled. But start to write down all the facts that stack the odds in your favor and all the facts that dispute the negative belief. So for me, it was, do I really need to know everything? Or what would happen if I didn't know the answer to something? Does that mean that I'm not worthy? Or does that just mean I don't know that particular answer? And so for me, the unraveling came between separating what I did, what I knew from who I am. Let me say that again. It began by me separating what I did, what I knew from who I am. My worth should not go up or down based on what I know. And when I began to dispute this idea that I needed to know everything to be worthy to be on that stage, it just brought an ease. It just brought a sense of playfulness. It just allowed me to be present in the moment, not waiting for the shoe to drop or the question that would prove that I was not worthy and I shouldn't be on that stage. Nothing changed on the outside, but everything changed on the inside when I finally took the time to dispute this idea that my worth was attached to my knowledge base. Sounds so simple, but it took a long time for me to really believe that and show up on stage with a different belief about what it meant to be relevant, what it meant to be a leader, a thought leader in that space. And then F, which is the important thing. It's all about how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about our life, how we feel about our work, about our mission, our meaning. Everything we do comes down to how we feel about ourselves. And look, we are human. There's going to be good days and not so good days. But when we can stack the odds in our favor and build more evidence for all that we are versus all that we're not, that's when the magic happens. So F, when we begin to see what that activating event is, and there might be different ones, and then B, we take the time to notice the irrational beliefs that we have attached to that event. And then C, we also take the time to notice the negative consequences, the things that stop us in our tracks, that push us back, that stop us from sharing all of ourselves with the world. And we take the time to dispute the thoughts and the feelings that are not moving us closer to our best possible future. We then get to exchange our feelings for the negative feelings that we then associate with this event. for the positive, feel-good emotions and feelings that we can now have as we look forward to this same event from a very different lens, a very different point of view. So how would your life change if you stopped questioning who you are and you started believing more in who you are? This is not a this or that. This is the land of and it will take work. But I really encourage you to take the time and maybe listen to this episode a few times and really take the time to go through the A, the activating event, B, the irrational beliefs, C, the consequences, write it down so you can see it. And then D, write down and dispute those irrational thoughts that either someone gave to you many, many years ago or you put upon yourself for some reason. And know that you're not alone in this journey. And then F, think about the freedom that comes when we let go of that negativity of the past into the feel-good emotions and possibilities for the future. So a short one today, my friend, but I hope you find it useful. I want this show to be strategic, actionable, to the point, so that you can get out there and live your best life, not your perfect life.